For those of you who don't know, Maria's company not only created a novel device, but created a category. Had to identify the way it was going to get paid, the way that it was going to get reimbursed. So there's not one element of your journey that actually had a predicate. How the hell did you think that you were going to do this?
Well, thank you, Julie. That's quite an opening. And thank you for having me, first of all. It's great to be here in front of all of you and tell the story of our journey at SPR. So I'll just give a little bit of history and just answer your question, I think, along the ways with that perspective on our history. So in 2008, was actually part of a company here in Cleveland that sold that company to Medtronic in pelvic health care. And at that time, our chairman came to me and said, hey, what are we going to do next? And as part of my graduate work here at Case Western Reserve, I was studying in the late 90s a novel way to treat peripheral pain, and it was something that was going to be a non-opioid, non-surgical, non-destructive solution for pain management. And he said, well, how about getting back into pain management? So this was 2008, 2009. For those of you VCs out there, remember how difficult the market was at that time. And so we were starting a company in a very difficult economic climate, and we were navigating, an idea that was really, as Julie alluded to, creating a new opportunity in the pain treatment continuum that didn't have a predicate from an FDA regulation perspective, didn't have a predicate from a reimbursement perspective, but we knew that this device had promise to significantly impact patients' lives, reduce their pain, and improve their quality of life. So I remember saying to my chairman at the time, he said, well, I'd love for you to run this company. And I said, well, and he said, I'll give you 24 or 48 hours to think about it. Let me know what you want to do on a Monday. And I said, well, what happens if it doesn't work? And he's like, I don't know, make it work. And so here we are 15 years later. We've navigated FDA clearance back in 2016. We've navigated commercial adoption. We've now treated over 32,000 patients across the US. We have 52 sales reps across the country. And we've done that in a novel way in which, from a financing perspective, I know what audience I'm speaking to here. In the early days, we're part of something that a fund was actually created from some high net worth individuals here in Northeast Ohio because it was such a difficult climate as far as raising money. So that was some of our seed dollars, along with JumpStart, along with Lorain County Community College, and some other unique opportunities that we had to seed the company. We also raised money through the National Institutes of Health and the Department of Defense. We've raised over $42 million in very competitive contracts and grants that are not only a great source of non-dilutive funding, but also a validation of our technology, our team, the unmet need, and have really advanced our research and development efforts. So on top of that, through the years, besides that seed funding, we did advance through different stages of funding, including family office funding and venture capital funding. But all in all, we've raised a total of $120 million in equity financing from the very beginning of an idea, of a technology, to now full commercialization and opportunities still with the healthy balance sheet right now to expand that even further. So I think Julie and I were talking before we came up here, and I always joke that it's somewhat our conservative Midwest roots that we've raised an efficient amount of capital and have protected all class of our investors, have been very mindful of that through all of these financings, unlike some of the competitors within our space that have raised 3, 4, 5 times the amount that we have and are still burning a significant amount of cash and have not grown to the level we're at. So my point in all that is that it can be done with smart capital efficiency and a leadership team that is executing and has a transparent communication style within the company. And that's where we really pride ourselves as far as that culture piece of it that allows for the growth that we've achieved.
So you covered so much there. I really have two things that I want to dive in. When you started out, we did not know as a country, as a world, what was going to happen with the opioid crisis. At the time, that was the cheapest, fastest way to treat pain. Now you come forward with a device that puts wires through someone's skin, and you're comparing that to the ease of taking an opioid drug. How do you raise money in that environment where somebody looks at you and says, that's just such a much more difficult path? You seemed brilliant afterwards, right? But you didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, it's a great question. So so Julie alluded to it. Our technology is a medical device that's based on the concept of neuromodulation or electrical stimulation. So we are fortunate that neuromodulation had been used and continues to be used in an implantable form, like a pacemaker, but to treat pain, and has a 30+ year history. But unfortunately, it was always relegated to a treatment of last resort. However, there was such a wide group of physicians in this interventional pain community that had adopted that technology and really found the value in it. But again, it wasn't being fully utilized and still is not today. There's 7 or 8 spinal cord stimulation companies out there today competing for that market share of, again, a technology that's been relegated to a treatment of last resort. So we leveraged the concepts around that implantable form. We advanced it into a non-implantable form. So our therapy is a 60-day therapy that has shown significant pain relief at the end of the 60 days, but also durable effect. And we have a different mechanism of action that created a patent portfolio of over 295 patents now that put up barriers to entry for the competition. So when we did that, we were able to, not only convince our adopters, which are the customers, with this scientific new mechanism of action that resonated with them, that's been published now, that's been patented, et cetera, but also to the investors is saying, okay, this world of neuromodulation is not new. We're doing it in a different and new way. We're doing it in a more efficient way that doesn't have as high a cost burden on it because it's a lower cost technology that ultimately won't cost the payers as much. It won't cost the industry as much as far as to support that from an overhead perspective within an organization. So we can treat more patients. We can grow faster, and that's what we've been able to do. So the opioid crisis was certainly a part of the story. It continues to be, unfortunately, and we're able to, offer a solution to patients and physicians that is a non-opioid solution in that earlier phase of the continuum of care. But because there was already a concept that was accepted in the medical device community of using neuromodulation to treat pain, we were able to leverage that, but then show the competitive advantages that we had with our solution that attracted the capital that we raised.
There's so much, again, in what you just said, but when you have so many different facets of risk, what you really just told everyone is you have to de-risk as many of them as you can, and finding a predicate or an analogy or something that is known, is understood, you have to de-risk some of them, right, where you have a place to stand on. So I'm going to pivot for a second and just talk a little bit about your solution that you, for those of you who may know in the medical device world, there's a category of orphan drugs, and they tend to be very, very successful because you can charge a whole bunch every month, and the person has to take it every month. So there's much more of an industry for orphan drugs or very small market applications in the drugs. In devices, it's harder because you implant it and you come back maybe 5 or 10 years later to change a battery, right? So it's a much harder. Using this in-between category of 60 days of therapeutics, right? To me, that really speaks to, and there was a comment on our earlier panel, the gentleman from Lubrizol who said, understand how you help your customer win. In this case, the providers can bill along the way into the delivery of that intervention, and not just get paid for putting it in. So talk a little bit about how you stumbled on that, how you really thought about that.
I don't know how I stumbled on it exactly, but it's definitely that what you laid out there is another competitive advantage of what we have to offer to both the interventional pain customer, their site of service, whether that be a hospital or an ambulatory surgery center, and ultimately the payer too, and then finally, the patient themselves. So it's something that when we think about the health economics around any sort of medical technology or healthcare innovation, we are more and more today getting the pressure not only around the clinical data and what level of clinical data do you have, and are you truly demonstrating safety and effectiveness. It doesn't matter if you've got your FDA clearance, that's one checkbox, but now it's a matter of the level of data to support coverage and reimbursement coverage, especially from the commercial payers. We're fortunate that there's an existing national coverage decision from Medicare, as well as a code that is consistent with our device and covers our device, but on the commercial commercial payer side, it is a road of navigation that we are pursuing right now to gain more and more commercial payer coverage. So besides the clinical data, it is the health economic data. So does your technology, does your product, whatever it may be, does it save the healthcare system cost? And how can you prove that? You may be able to collect data in your ongoing clinical trials that are going to be able to capture comparison of your product to a standard of care so that you can see what the cost savings are. Can you take costs out of the system, meaning if we are a total solution for pain early in the treatment continuum, what is that then avoiding as far as other potential therapies that may cost that healthcare system? They're going to avoid surgery, they're going to avoid potentially an implantable device that is much more costly, and they're going to be hopefully able to get back to work and be productive in society. So those types of things are what the payers, especially the commercial payers, are looking for. And so we're navigating that through data development plans, et cetera, with our clinical data, as well as real world evidence. And I can't emphasize this enough that once you are commercial, if you are healthcare companies out there that are going commercial, collecting that real world evidence to validate what you found in your prospective clinical trials. We've been fortunate that through our commercial success, we've had patients, we offer them an opportunity to opt in to being contacted during their 60 days of treatment and thereafter, and we've collected that real world evidence. And we've published last year in over 6,000 patients that showed the data was similar to those prospective studies. And that's pretty unusual. Any of those that come from a clinical research background, which was my original roots, you've got a protocol, you've got a specific patient population. It's pretty unusual that you're going to be able to translate that exactly to the real world experience. But we've seen that, and you're able to do it if your technology is something that was designed to be used in clinical practice that is comfortable for those physicians and something that they're used to. Even it can still be innovative, we're certainly innovative, but something that they can adopt easily and then advance within their practice. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's very critical to understand that payer landscape for whatever product you're developing, understand what the competing technologies are, understand what the cost to the system are as far as the different therapies that the patients and the physicians have to offer. And then from a business perspective, obviously customer margin is key as well as company margin. So we have a very healthy gross profit margin, but on the customer side too, we need to make sure that we're passing enough margin obviously over to them as well. And then what gets wrapped up in all of that is the reimbursement payments. So that equation, thinking about that early in the process so that you can develop a pricing strategy that allows for all of those boxes to be checked to ensure then you're not going to be a deterrent no matter what their site of service is or what the customer call point is. They're able to satisfy them and they're able to embrace that product. In healthcare, we hope that their physicians are making the best decisions they can for their patients. We know we partner with them. We know they want to do that, but we also know that they have pressures as well on the customer margin side and making sure that it is profitable to their facilities so that they can justify doing that to their administrators. So that has to be a key part of the equation as well.
We'll get a little bit more into just the economics of any industry and what's unique about healthcare, but I want to ask you a question. 15 years. Are you a VC entity? Like, are you an investment, a VC? 15 years of capital is patient capital. And so how do you think about that? And what is really, for life sciences, biotech, is it a VC investor or is it a different kind of capital?
I believe it's still the VC community. There's a number of healthcare VC, investors out there that are focused on healthcare investments. They're very, there's probably a lot here that know the space, know the right questions to ask, can identify a opportunity of investment for a growing business. And I hope that those, there's been a lot of shakeup in different firms and whatnot through the years and the different financial landscape that we've had. But certainly the VC community is very ripe and hungry, I believe, for new innovation and new opportunities. We have done basically four series of raises, and in the third, the Series C and Series D is when we brought in our large VC investors. And being in Northeast Ohio, headquartered here in Cleveland, we have offices in Minneapolis and in Chapel Hill, but being in Cleveland is not always the easiest place to be raising capital for a med tech company. Typically, we see those investors on the coast, East or West Coast. One of our major investors is on the West Coast, is in California, but looked outside the box, looked for opportunities to invest in companies outside of that region, and it's worked just fine. So it does work out, and I think that we need to do more in Northeast Ohio. I know it's an initiative of JumpStart's to raise the awareness of successful companies like SPR and others that are in the region to attract that capital and to be able to show that return to that investment. So our strategy now is that we're in a good spot to execute on our growth strategy through the capital that we've raised through VCs, and we are looking for what that next chapter looks like. But always having the front of mind to have ultimately that return on investment to our investors, no matter, again, as I said, whether it was the early high net worth individual investor in our Series A or the large VC investor that came in our Series D. We've managed our cap table to ensure that all will win on that day that we win, and we always want to look for the opportunity that's going to really satisfy all of our stakeholders. First and foremost, our patients, the product, our employees, our team members. We have 280 employees across our different offices and across the company, and ultimately, again, our investors. So it is a journey, as we talked about, but it is something that, all those facets, I would just say that, building out a leadership team. I mean, I came from a background in biomedical engineering at a case with a master's, no formal business training per se, undergraduate in engineering management from Miami, worked at a couple small entrepreneurial companies as well as large companies, but the team around me are the best of the best, and hiring those people that are better than you to bring new ideas to the table, to be able to execute on the different stages of the company, and then surrounding yourself with a board of directors that also has the experience and is supportive through this journey, because there's one of my board members told me years ago, who's the former CEO of SPR, said, this industry is lots of twists and turns, and the only way to navigate those twists and turns is to have open and transparent communication across your leadership team, across the organization as a whole, because you want to minimize those surprises. We can't afford to have some big surprise because we're still relatively small with really efficient capital, and so being able to navigate those challenges that we have through the years has been based upon that company culture.
So I think one of the reasons that this is VC is you talk a lot about the barriers, right? And quick liquidity makes sense when there's low barriers to a competitor to come in and take your spot. I'd like to see somebody else go through the last 15 years, even if they got it down to 10. There's a lot of alligators and vipers in that path. I want to dig a little bit more into last night. One of the venture investors from New York made the comment, and I just thought it was such an interesting way to think about. He said, so much of the companies and everything that I'm seeing here is undervalued in the market. And I said, explain more. And so he went through and it said, from the eyes of the investor, here are all the reasons why Midwest opportunities are actually below market valued right now. This is a discount opportunity, a value opportunity. Talk a little bit about that California venture and why did you find them? Did they find you? How did you convince them that this is the right value for them?
Yeah, and so when they came in, that was 2021 is when we attracted that investor. And I think at that time, again, there's been quite a bit of shakeup in the world of healthcare venture capital investment. And it was something that we worked with an advisor. So we worked with an investment banker that made those introductions. And we were navigating, kind of coming up on our early commercial phase and saying, okay, well, here's a fork in the road. Are we going to raise more money to enhance the value, to go into that next chapter of commercial execution? And if so, what does that growth strategy look like? So that was really critical to attracting that large VC investor, is being able to convince them and then execute through our history, or show the execution and the credibility that we had of execution, that we could execute on this growth strategy, and that the value inflection points in the future around expansion of commercialization, product innovation, new data, more patents, you name it. Those were also benchmarks that were going to be valuable to their investment. And then just to see through the years of our valuation as well, that there was a consistent increase in valuation over time that was based upon, of course, our performance and how we were executing, but also the market size. And so we had done some third-party market research to validate that, again, yes, we're in pain, but what does that mean? And I remember our board asking us when we got our FDA clearance, which was a general indication clearance for anywhere to treat in the body, they would challenge me and our executive team on, well, what are you treating? And really, what markets are you taking share from? And it's like, well, we're not taking share for anything. We are actually building a new market. We're building it following our clinical data. And so that took some time and to then identify, okay, these are the markets that are going to stick. These are the ones that the clinicians, the customers really gravitated towards. And even though we had shown the clinical data, are they going to use it in commercial practice? We started to see that build out. And then once we had that early commercial traction, we were able to put that in front of the VC investor and say, okay, here's where it's going. Here's what the adoption rate is. Here's how our vision of then expanding this across multiple different areas of the country and what that growth strategy would look like. We also had a strategy in which we were never going to put multiple dots across the map out of the gate. So we were very purposeful in saying we're going to build out 5 to 6 U.S. sales territories. That was it. 2018, 2019, we had 8 territories of sales. And we focused on following and partnering with the physicians that had worked in our clinical studies to go deep within their accounts. You find multiple different implanters or clinicians at a account, at a facility, and then again go deep within those accounts and see them use Sprint or device Sprint for more than just one area of pain. And so really following that customer journey and then building upon that with awareness, marketing, sales efforts that would then expand to the next phase of our territory expansion. So when we showed those first few phases that got us to about 20 U.S. territories, that's again when we went to the VCs and said, okay, we've got 20 territories out there right now. We have a vision to double that. This is what it could look like from a growth trajectory, and this is the market data that will back that up, that we're not going to hit some cliff and plateau, that there's actually a market size that will support the growth story.
I'm going to pick up on something that you said a couple of minutes ago, and that was the protecting of your original investor, cap table as an original investor. We thank you for that. We don't always see that. Why did you, because I'm sure along the way, that was a compromise into the immediate moment, but you kept that as a value. Why was that worth whatever you left on the table in that moment? Why was it worth that?
Yeah, I mean, as a founder and the commitment that we made to those early investors that, had the faith in me and the team and our product in those very early stages prior to FDA clearance, it's an obligation. It has to be. I mean, those are the ones that are going to seed your company. I know it's not always easy, and we did certainly in our Series C financing, we had another term sheet that was very just aggressive. It was, preferences, and it was additional board seats, and it was things that were going to change who we were in our DNA. And we said, no, we don't need that. We have a run rate here. We can find that investor that is, going to be similar in our culture, similar in the belief, have the belief in us, and truly also appreciate and recognize the value of those early investors. So, and again, many of those early investors were either sidecars, individual investors, or through this fund that we had raised, all within our community. And so we've got this, again, I'm excited for the day, and it will come, in which we're able to give a return to all of our investors. But those early investors that believed in the product, believed in our story, and have been with us through the journey, it was just very important to us. And we are going to always protect them, whether it's, if we do future financings, there's opportunities where we could, buy out those early investors and whatnot to make sure they're always going to have that healthy return if there's a point in time that they're becoming, kind of, all right, we're ready. And we have our major investor that came in on this last round is also a secondary investor. So they have the opportunity to, buy out those shares. And we thought that was also a great benefit with that investor, that they would, obviously take more share of the company, but also be able to make the early investors whole. So we have that option on the table today, but it was just part of our DNA. It was just something that was very important to us as a founder and as a board.
I think that's I call that integrity, right? There's an element of integrity that you know who you are, you know what you value, and that gives you that discipline to not be distracted. And last question, because we're almost at time, is there's lots of disbelief that a Midwest market, can sustain a therapeutic, biotechnology, a med device company. What would you say? Why do you think that we actually can be a region that can win in this way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so much talent and so much expertise in this region. If we look at any of our medical facilities, our universities, throughout Ohio, but as in Northeast Ohio as well, there's so much talent to draw upon. But we also knew that we needed to look outside the box a little bit and make sure that we could draw talent from other expertise across the country. So I mentioned our Minneapolis office draws expertise from those large med tech, companies in the areas of marketing, in the areas of professional education, and in reimbursement. We have an office down in Chapel Hill in the Research Triangle area, and that started with our chief scientific officer, who actually started his graduate work here at Case, then ended up following a professor down to Duke, and then finished at Duke. And we said, well, we're not going to let you go now. We want you to open the office down there. And he's built a team around him of multiple different PhDs out of Duke and other areas in that Research Triangle area. So you need to go where the talent is, but the focus of being able to attract talent, again, our headquarters are here. They've been here for 15 years. We're not going to change that. We've attracted significant talent to the region and within the region as well. And it is something that, again, was just part of our DNA that we didn't feel as though we needed to change. And it was something that, as I was challenged as a CEO, I was once told, okay, well, you're going to have a difficult time as a female CEO to attract a board and to ultimately, because of your gender and because of your relatively young age at the time. I said, well, I can't do anything about either one of those things. So I'm going to, be able to hopefully build a team around this product that believes in the product, believes in our mission. And that's fortunately what we've been able to do. So I think it's a lot of resiliency as an entrepreneur. I'm sure there's several of you out there right now. It's not an easy path. There's what I always like to say is those challenges that you may face, try to turn those into opportunities. And again, that team around you, that support around you is key, and be transparent with those people. I mean, you don't need to. I'm a very half glass full person, and I don't like to focus on any of the negative, but you need to focus on transparency in order to navigate those challenges.
So in all of those, and I'm going to guess there's probably thousands of moments along 15 years where you're like, any sane, rational person would just go and find a normal job. If you had to pinpoint one thing that said, no, I'm going to stay, what attribute, what thought, what is that thing that you could put your finger on and say really drove you to stay focused on this during those really, really low points?
I'm also very type A and controlling and don't like to lose and very competitive. So I think it's that competitive spirit as well. When FDA said, hey, we don't think you have a predicate. We don't think that you're going to be able to get this 510K clearance. And on the 90th day of the review cycle, I get a call from the division director who I went to Case Western with, I went to graduate school with, and he said, Maria, we're not going to get there on this path, but we could get here on that path. I said, all right, let's go for that path. And there was always, we had several no's, whether that's from an investor, from the FDA, from payers and whatnot, but there's always a way, and we have found those ways, knowing again that at the heart of all of this is the impact that we're having on these patients' lives and the stories that we get from patients and how we have truly changed their life by improving their pain and improving their quality of life. So that's how we stay grounded. That's our center of our credo, and but we're all very competitive too, and we see that we can continue to be the leader in this new area of peripheral nerve stimulation and are very proud of that position and feel as though that credibility that we have in that leadership position and that responsibility is something that we take to heart, and we want to make sure that we continue to be on the front of that.
What does 5 years from now look like for you?
Yeah, so I think, as I think about the 5-year chapter, the next chapter for SPR, we have a number of different avenues that we could pursue. And the other thing I should mention, just in, any of you that are out there raising capital, what we're very proud of, as well as beyond just, protecting all of our class of investors, is maintaining optionality. And what I mean by that is that you're not locked into a certain path of an exit strategy because of your balance sheet or because of your cap table, in which you don't have that option to pursue a different path, because we can't control all those paths, especially on the M&A side. And so we, as an organization, just were built for M&A. There's partners out there that could supercharge our business, that could align with our business. So we have those conversations going, and we're seeing kind of, we can't control their timing, our timing. We continue to focus on executing and building and owning our own and controlling our own destiny. But that's a path that could be pursued. If that path doesn't work out, we have the option to pursue another path, which would be additional capital, perhaps, going to the next stage of growth. Someday the medtech IPO market is going to open up, maybe as early as next year. That could be a path as well. So my guidance or my experience there would just say again, make sure that you're thinking about the future and those capital raises. I know it's so hard to raise that capital, and when you get that term sheet or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, this is it finally. But make sure it's going to check those boxes and allow you to have that optionality in the future, so that you can continue to control your own destiny.
This has been great. I think you'll all understand just the thoughtfulness, the strategic, cold, hard, logical thoughtfulness of the way you've approached your business. I know in sort of cheering for you and knowing you over the last 15 years, the fact that you are just so rational and logical about these steps along the way and haven't gotten caught up in all of the shiny objects, the doom and gloom, all of these things. To me, that's really what I have always admired and been incredibly impressed about how you lead. I just think Maria and SPR, the companies like this in our region, these are the companies that we all need to absolutely applaud and support. This is our unicorn, right? SPR and companies like this is going to be our Medtronics. This is our solution to the opioid crisis. This is a big deal. So I from all of us here, really just love what you've done and just are so excited, and will continue to support you in everything that we do. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie.